In a small village nestled among green fields and tall trees, there lived a young woman named Amara. She wasn't particularly beautiful or ugly, but people noticed her because she always wore bright wrappers and moved quickly through the village like she was chasing something. Everyone knew her for two things. She worked harder than any man in the village, and she couldn't keep her mouth shut, even if her life depended on it. Before sunrise each day, while others were still wrapped in the Aya blankets, Amara would be out in the fields. Her hands were rough from work, with calluses that showed her dedication. When other workers complained about the hot sun or their aching backs, Amara kept going. She could carry 2 large bags of yams on her head, while others struggled with one. The men in the village often felt ashamed when they saw her out working them, but they couldn't deny her strength. One morning, while helping at the chief's farm, Amara discovered why she was so strong. She overheard 2 elderly women talking about her real mother, who had died giving birth to her. "That woman had the strength of 3 men," one said. "They say she could lift a full-grown goat with one hand." Amara spent that whole day thinking about her mother, whom she had never known. But by evening, she had told everyone in the village about her strong mother, even though the elderly women had meant to keep it private. Her constant talking caused more trouble than anyone could handle. At the village market, where women sold their goods on wooden tables and spread their wares on clean cloths, Amara's voice would ring out above the haggling and shouting. She would move from one seller to another, spreading stories that caused fights and arguments. One market day, she told a palm oil seller that her husband had been seen entering another woman's compound at night. The palm oil seller, in her anger, poured hot oil on her husband's clothes and burned all his belongings. Later, it turned out the man had been helping the sick woman's child who had a fever. The couple divorced, and their 3 children had to be split between relatives. Despite incidents like these, Amara didn't change. She enjoyed the power her words had over people. When she walked through the village, she could see people's heads turn, wondering what new information she carried. Some even tried to buy her silence with gifts, fresh fish, new wrappers, or cowries. She took their gifts, but never kept her promises. One hot afternoon, her childhood friend Chidi came running to her compound. His face was covered in sweat, and his hands shook as he grabbed her arm. "Amara," he whispered, pulling her behind a storage hut, "I need your help. It's about Madhu." Madhu was their friend who had studied in the city and returned with new ideas. Chidi explained that Madhu had gotten himself into serious trouble. He's been stealing money from his father's trading business to help a girl in the next village. Her father is demanding payment, or he'll tell everyone about their secret relationship. Madhu's planning to run away next week. Amara's heart beat faster with excitement at this juicy information. She pretended to be concerned, placing her hand on her chest. "Oh, poor Madhu. Don't worry, I won't tell anyone." But even as she spoke, her mind was already planning who to tell first. By sunset, she had spread the news to every corner of the village. She added her own details, claiming Madhu had stolen not just money, but also valuable trading beads and even his mother's gold anklets. The story grew bigger with each telling. When Madhu's father heard the rumors, he flew into a rage. He beat Madhu so badly that the young man couldn't walk for 3 days. The shame of his son's actions made the father sick, and he died from a fever 2 months later. Madhu was forced to marry someone he didn't love to restore his family's honor, and he never smiled again. Chidi confronted Amara at the river, grabbing her arm so hard it left marks. "You've destroyed his life," he shouted, his face twisted with anger. "I trusted you." But Amara just laughed and splashed water at him. "Don't be so serious," she said. "People would have found out anyway." The village began to change around her. Women would grab their washing and move to a different spot when she approached the river. Men would stop talking and stare at her coldly until she passed. Even the children, who used to run to her for sweets and stories, now ran away when they saw her coming. But the worst was yet to come. One hot afternoon, while collecting firewood near the stream, Amara heard strange sounds coming from behind a large bush. She crept closer, pushing aside leaves to see better. There, hidden from view, was Neka, the wife of a respected farmer, locked in an embrace with Obi, who was married to the fierce Adana. Neka saw Amara and stumbled backward, her wrapper falling loose. She ran to Amara, her feet slipping in the mud. "Please," she begged, grabbing Amara's legs. "My husband will kill me if he finds out. I'll give you anything." She pulled out a bag of expensive cowries and pressed them into Amara's hands. Amara took the cowries and promised silence, but her tongue was already itching to speak. That evening, at the village square, where women gathered to pound fufu, she couldn't resist. "You won't believe what I saw today," she started, and the women leaned in close. The story spread like poison through the village. Adana, Obi's wife, heard it while selling vegetables at the market. She dropped her basket and ran home, screaming curses. She didn't just pack her things, she destroyed everything in the house, breaking pots, tearing clothes, and even killing Obi's prized roosters. When Obi returned home, Adana attacked him with a hot soup ladle, leaving scars on his face that would never heal. She left for her father's village, but not before telling everyone about Obi's other secrets. How he had cheated people in business and stolen from his own brother. Neka suffered worse. Her husband didn't beat her or shout at her. Instead, he called a family meeting where he publicly disowned her. No one was allowed to speak to her or help her. Women spat on the ground when she passed. Men made rude gestures behind her back. Her own mother turned her away when she begged for food. One morning, children playing by the river found Neka's body floating face down in the water. Her wrapper had snagged on a tree root and her eyes were still open, staring at nothing. The village fell silent with shock. During the burial, people glanced at Amara from the corners of their eyes, but no one spoke to her. Amara tried to push away her guilt by working harder than ever. She would spend entire days in the hot sun, planting and harvesting until her hands bled. But at night, she could hear Neka's voice in her dreams, begging her to keep the secret. The village turned completely against her now. At the market, sellers would claim to be sold out when she tried to buy food. Young men who had once admired her strength now made cruel jokes about her. Some people even suggested she might be a witch, using dark powers to discover people's secrets. Then came the day she met Azinze, the elderly woman who lived at the edge of the village. Azinze was different from other old people. She didn't gossip or complain. She spent her days weaving baskets and telling stories to children under a massive Iroko tree. Everyone knew her sad history, how she had lost all 5 of her children to a mysterious illness that swept through the village years ago. Her husband had died shortly after, leaving her alone. That evening, as Amara walked past carrying a heavy load of firewood, Azinze called out to her. "Young woman," she said, her voice gentle but firm, "I see darkness growing around you like storm clouds. Your words are destroying lives. Be careful, or the destruction will turn back on you." Amara, tired from work and bitter from the village's treatment, snapped. She dropped her firewood with a crash and turned to face the old woman. "What do you know about anything?" she shouted, her voice echoing in the quiet evening. "You couldn't even protect your own children. Maybe they died because they had a useless mother like you." The children sitting with Azinze scattered in fear. The old woman's face crumpled in pain, but she didn't speak. She just turned away and continued weaving her basket, though her hands trembled badly. Angry at being ignored, Amara decided to hurt Azinze more. The next morning, she went to the market with a new story. She moved from stall to stall, whispering to anyone who would listen. "You know why Azinze's children really died?" she would say, lowering her voice dramatically. "I heard she sacrificed them to evil spirits. That's why she sits under that tree. She's communicating with demons. Haven't you noticed how children get sick after listening to her stories?" The story spread quickly, growing more terrible with each telling. Soon people were saying they had seen Azinze dancing naked under the moon and heard her calling to evil spirits. Parents grabbed their children and ran inside when she walked past. Someone painted evil marks on her door at night. Others threw rotten food at her house. The village council held an emergency meeting. They discussed driving Azinze from the village, but no one wanted to approach her house. The children who had loved her stories now had nightmares about her. The old woman stopped coming out, and smoke stopped rising from her cooking fire. Then came the night of the big storm. Thunder shook the ground and lightning split the sky. In the middle of the night, while rain poured down in sheets, Azinze left her house for the last time. She walked slowly to the Iroko tree where she had spent so many happy hours telling stories to children. The night guard, hiding from the rain under a shelter, saw her standing there in her white wrapper, face lifted to the sky. He heard her speaking, her words carried by the wind. Let the one who spreads poison with their mouth bear the mark of their sin. Let their weapon of destruction become their shame. Let them carry the weight of their words in their flesh until they learn the power of silence. The next morning, they found Azinzi's body under the tree. She looked peaceful, as if she had simply decided to sleep in the rain. But the ground around her was dry, even though water dripped from every leaf and branch. That same morning, Amara woke up feeling strange. Her face felt heavy, and when she touched her mouth, she screamed. Her lips had grown to twice their normal size. Throughout the day, her mouth continued to grow, stretching wider and longer until it hung down to her chest like a horrible growth. People who saw her ran away in terror. She couldn't eat properly anymore. Food fell from her enormous lips, and water dribbled down her chin. When she tried to speak, only garbled sounds came out. Children who had once feared her words now threw stones at her, calling her mouth monster and demon woman. Desperate and afraid, Amara traveled through 3 villages to find Mama Iyabo, a famous seer who lived in a hut surrounded by hanging bones and dried herbs. The old woman took one look at her and laughed. "Ah," she said, "I see you've finally been paid in your own coin." "Your curse comes from a powerful place," Mama Iyabo explained, stirring a pot of strong-smelling medicine. "It was born from the tears of those you hurt and sealed with the last breath of a pure heart. Only true change can break it. You must learn to use your mouth for healing instead of hurting," the seer continued. "Each kind word will shrink your curse a little. Each secret kept will lighten your burden. But remember, if you return to your old ways, the curse will return twice as strong." Humbled and frightened, Amara returned to her village. For the first time in her life, she began to think before she spoke. When she heard gossip, she kept quiet. When she saw wrong things happening, she spoke to the person directly instead of spreading rumors. When people shared their troubles with her, she listened without judgment and kept their secrets. Slowly, over many months, her mouth began to shrink. The process was painful. Sometimes she would wake up in the night feeling like her face was on fire. But gradually, her lips returned to their normal size. By then, Amara had learned her lesson deeply. She became known as someone who could keep a secret. People began to trust her again, sharing their problems and asking for advice. She worked just as hard as before, but now she did it quietly, without needing everyone to notice. Years later, when young people in the village would start gossiping, the elders would tell them the story of Amara and her cursed mouth. "Remember," they would say, "words can kill as surely as a knife, and secrets can poison as deadly as snake venom. Use your words to heal, not to harm." Amara herself would sometimes sit under the Iroko tree where Azinze used to rest. She would tell stories to children, not gossip or secrets, but tales of kindness and wisdom. And on quiet evenings, when the wind rustled through the leaves, she thought she could hear Azinze's voice, no longer cursing, but blessing her changed heart. The village never forgot the lessons learned from Amara's story. They say that even today, if you visit that small village and listen carefully, you might hear the rustle of the Iroko tree's leaves, whispering warnings about the power of words and the importance of keeping secrets.